Welcome back to Open Window Politics. Today we're going to be going through my latest 2026 Senate prediction. So right off the bat, we have Democrats at 32 seats, plus the 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats, and then 31 Republican seats. But as you can see, there are a lot of Republican states that we have not yet assigned a value to, assigned a projection to. So we will start out going through each of the safe red states. So we'll add a... for now, we'll just keep safe red and safe blue, but we got states like Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Oklahoma, most of the South here. We'll come back to Ohio. I do think that it will be a Republican state, but for now, I'm going to go with that and that. And then we'll go with... It'll be interesting to see what happens in Nebraska, but I do see if Dan Osborne runs again. He's been floated as a contender for Don Bacon's seat too in the 2nd Congressional District, so it'll be interesting to see what he does. In the end, I do think that on the Senate level, we'll go to the Republican, and then we will now do the safe blue seats. We have states like Illinois, up here, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Delaware. Then, let's see here. Not missing any. Could be missing some. And then we'll add, next up we'll go to the Democrat. We'll just stay on the Democrats and go with, let's see here. Well, it's going to add a likely characterization for some more Democratic states. And then we will have few others here, and then after that we're going to go to the likely Republican states. There are going to be quite a few of these here, so that brings Republicans up to 49. And let's see here, in Jersey that will most likely be for the Democratic seat, and then we still have a couple states, 5, 6, 7 left to classify, and we will go with, in the state of Arizona, that's going to be a hold for the Republicans. So right off the bat, before you've even characterized any of the lean or likely states, Republicans are sitting at the majority, at least for the rest of the Trump presidential term, because J.D. Vance was going to be the tie-breaking vote. So even if Democrats were able to win every seat left that is currently on this projection, they would still not be able to hold a majority in the Senate. I do think the House is going to be a different call. I'm fairly confident in the Democrats' ability to win back the House. It'll be interesting to see what the margin ends up being, but I do think the Senate is just going to be a rough battleground for the Democrats. There are just quite a few states that are smaller in population, that have the same amount of senators, like Wyoming and California have the same amount of senators, even though way more people live in California. And Republicans just have quite a few more of these smaller states. The Democrats do have some in the Northeast, in the New England area, but there are just far more lightly populated Republican states that each get 2 senators each. So we will now go to the lean rating. So here I'm going to go with Ohio. I think that this has got a pretty good chance of going to Republican. I think there is talk of Sherrod Brown running. I could be wrong, but of him running again. So I think if it were not to be him, I think it would pretty easily be likely, but in the end, still a seat for the Republicans. So right off the bat, there we go. We get 51 seats for the Republicans, and I do think things will get better. I'm going to go with now some Democrat characterizations, though. I think in the states we have Minnesota and New Hampshire. I think these are most likely both going to end up being as Democratic states. I do think that 2026 will be a good election for Democrats, but the odds are not looking good in the Senate. It's not quite as bad as the 2020 Senate, 2022 Senate seats elections, or 2024, where there were a bunch of Democrats that lost their seat, as well as in the midterms for Trump the first time around. And then we will now classify the, let's see here, we have some Democratic states. I do think that Michigan is probably going to remain in Democratic hands. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I do think that if the election were to be held today, it would most likely be a Democratic state. I do think that I might even have one more. I'm on the fence on this one in the terms of Maine. Susan Collins, I think if Susan Collins had voted for the big beautiful bill, that she probably would have lost her seat over that, but because she voted against it, as well as she's also just known as more of a moderate and has appeal for sure in Maine. And if it were just a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat, I do think that the Democrats would pretty easily be able to win, just because Maine is generally a Democratic-friendly state. It's usually lean or likely in Democratic column. Maine is also one of two states, as in addition to Nebraska, that breaks up their congressional districts by electoral college vote. So there is the one, usually it's likely or lean in the kind of rural Maine, and then we have the urban section of Maine on the bottom right that is very solidly Democrat, which ends up making the state at large usually be a lean Democratic state. But I do think Susan Collins, she's also got some time to turn things around. It'll be interesting. She's done quite well in previous elections, and many thought she was going to lose last time around 6 years ago but she ended up doing pretty well, was able to beat the Democrat. So I do think that this might be a close election for her, just because Democrats are probably going to do pretty well when it comes to most elections, but I doubt they will be able to do well enough to unseat a popular. Her approval rating actually isn't that high, but I think that she just has a lot of broad appeal with independents and Republicans, of course, that are willing to have a more moderate, aside from a Democrat, in the Senate there. So I do think that would most likely be a seat for Susan Collins, that she would remain in power. And then next up, we get to North Carolina and Georgia. So I think one of these is a little easier to call than the other. We have the incumbent senator, I believe Jon Ossoff is running for, I could be wrong though, could be Raphael Warnock. I think it's Jon Ossoff though, that is running for this seat again, and he is currently the incumbent, so he does have the incumbency advantage. I also think that it'll be that the Sun Belt is going to progressively become more and more Democratic friendly. We saw in 2020, Biden was able to win not only Georgia, but also Arizona on the other end of the Sun Belt, as well as Nevada. Back in 2024, though, those Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina all went, as well as Arizona, went to Trump. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I do think that would be a tilt Republican or a tilt Democratic state. And then finally, I do think that in the state of North Carolina, there is not going to be an incumbent in this race because of the outlash from the big beautiful bill with one of North Carolina's senators with Trump. He threatened to primary him, so he decided to retire. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Generally, North Carolina is a little more Republican friendly than Georgia. Democrats haven't won North Carolina since 2008, so it'd be a rough uphill battle for sure. But in the end, that is my final prediction: 47 seats for the Democrats to 53 for the Republicans. So we basically end up right where we started. So that is the current makeup of the U.S. Senate: 53 Republicans to 47 Democrats. So I do think that would most likely result in roughly the same after the elections in 2026 are over. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe.